Hello friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead coming to you from beautiful Northwest Ohio with another video in the Every Bit Counts challenge where we do lots of food preservation. So why don't we go ahead and get started? The cherry tomatoes were piling up in the fridge. I planted way too many plants, and actually there are only a couple of us in the house that like cherry tomatoes for fresh snacking. So I decided that it was time for me to can these up somehow. So what I'm going to do is take the peach salsa recipe that I made a couple videos ago for you, and we're going to substitute tomatoes for half of the peaches. So I'm just finding 9 cups total of these cherry tomatoes. And we're going to go ahead and get those in a pot. I'm just making sure all of the stems are taken off and that I have a full 9 cups. And we're going to dump that here into our pot, and that's going to serve as half of the peaches in this recipe. Now the other half of the peaches will obviously be peaches. I'm still working through these on this week. We had 4 bushels of peaches in the house, and I've done lots of things with them, and this is one of the last projects with them. So you can see I'm not slicing them very thinly. That's because after this cooks down, all of these fruits and veggies are going to be blended together into a sauce. So instead of making a peach salsa that's chunky, we're going to make a peach sauce that is a little different. And look at these beautiful green peppers that are coming from my garden. It has been an amazing green pepper year here, the best I've ever had, and I think it's the weather. I can't take any credit for that. It's just that God has provided the right conditions for growing peppers here in Northwest Ohio, and I'm very excited about that. So we're putting all of these peppers to good use. I need 4 cups of bell peppers. And so I'm just chopping them up. Once again, not chopping them very finely because these will, after they soften, be blended together with the rest of the things that are in the pot. Now I had brought in some jalapenos from the garden, so instead of adding red pepper flakes to the recipe for a little bit of kick, I'm just slicing up 4 jalapenos and adding them to the mix. The next thing we need are onions. I need 1.5 cups of onions, so I just grabbed some of the smaller ones from what I had curing in the dining room, and we just got those chopped up and added to the pot. I feel comfortable making some of these substitutions to this recipe because I'm not changing the vinegar acidity ratio in it. I think that this is going to be just fine. Here is that vinegar. We are adding 3.5 cups. I'm also adding 3 cups of sugar. I'm just doing plain sugar instead of brown sugar this time. And then I'm also adding 1.5 cups of water. And that's it. We're going to get all that mixed together and on the stove to cook down. This is what it looks like cooking down. It smells amazing. We just need it to cook long enough to get everything to soften up so that we can hit it with the immersion blender here and blend it into a nice smooth sauce. So as I mentioned, instead of using this recipe to make a chunkier peach salsa, I'm making a kind of spicy peach sauce that I could use on top of fish or chicken or pork, any kind of meat as maybe a marinade or a sauce this winter. I'm very excited to try this. It's basically the same thing as a peach salsa, just with a little bit of tomato flavor. So we're filling up our pint jars with that sauce, and pints I find are about the perfect amount for a meal for the purposes I'm going to use it for. And then we're wiping the rims, and then these, because of the vinegar content, can safely be water bath canned, and they will can for 15 minutes in the water bath. But first we need to get our lids on. These are 4 jars canning lids. These are what I exclusively use. And if you would like a discount on some canning lids, check out the link in the video description and use my code 3rivers10. So getting our rings now on those lids, and then as I mentioned, we will process them in the water bath canner for 15 minutes, and then they'll be shelf stable and ready to enjoy for the rest of the year. Moving on to the next project, I harvested a bunch of Sugar Rush peach peppers. These are a spicy pepper with a hint of a peach flavor. We're going to make a hot sauce, but I'm not going to ferment it. This is going to be a quick sauce. So I just took the tops off of 30 peppers and put them in the blender, seeds and all. And then to that, I'm going to add 3 cloves of garlic. So for every 10 peppers I typically add 1 clove of garlic. To that, I'm adding 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And then we're also going to add 2.5 cups of apple cider vinegar. And that is it. All we need to do is blend all of this together in our blender here and make it smooth so that we can get it on the stove and let it kind of cook down for a little bit before we jar it up and can it. So be careful, the fumes from those peppers, woo, that'll open up your sinuses, so you don't want to stand over that pot or the blender. I'm immediately putting some water in the blender to get the spice and all that pepper juice out of there. Then I put a little bit of dish soap in there with water to kind of thoroughly clean it out. I don't want that to sit in my sink with all of that pepper juice on it, or it'll be a lot harder to clean. So make sure you clean that blender out when you're using something like garlic or hot peppers. It just sat on the stove until it kind of came to a boil, and then I decided to portion it out. This isn't going to make a lot of sauce, it's just 3 little half pints, but it will be great added to things like chili, or we can use it on top of tacos or anything else that we want to add a little spicy kick to throughout the year in our meal planning. I'm just trying to distribute the contents evenly between the 3 little jars, and as always then you want to wipe the rims. We're going to add our lids and get then our rings on. Put these in the water bath canner and process for just 10 minutes. And hot sauce, sometimes, as I mentioned, I will ferment my hot sauce and it will sit out on the counter for a while, and that adds a lot of flavor to it. But I will do that later on in the year with my cayennes. For these Sugar Rush peach peppers, we just decided to do this. So I've been doing lots of other canning that I haven't been showing you. I've just been trying to stick to showing you tutorials for new projects and not showing you repeats. But we've been doing lots of batches of green beans and fruit sauce, getting lots of things blanched and in the freezer. And so I'm not showing you all of my canning in case you were wondering. There's a lot of things that I just don't want to be redundant in sharing with you. The middle of the week, it got up to 110 degrees or more with the heat index here in Ohio, and it was just way too hot for me to be working in the kitchen. I thought about canning outdoors on my propane stove, but it was also just too hot to be outside. So Adam here, who's being silly, I told him to smile for the camera. Adam went downstairs and into the cellar and decided to hang some hooks for me so that I could work on a project that would allow me to be indoors where it's a little bit cooler and not standing in front of a hot stove. So our cold room in the cellar is not finished yet, but I need a place to hang my garlic and my onions. So Adam got some hooks hanging from the rafters here, and that's just going to have to do for now. These are my storage onions. They've been curing behind my wood stove for almost a month now, and they're completely cured and ready to be prepared for storage. So these are Patterson onions. I've in several videos shown you and explained a little bit more about growing these and when we harvested them and how we prepared them to be cured. But now that they are fully cured, now we need to prepare them for storage. So sitting down in front of our window air conditioning unit, it's the one cool spot in the house, and I'm just cutting off all of the greens that are all dried up from these onions, just so that what we have left are the bulbs. And these, if there were any dirty skins on them, I kind of pulled off some of the skins too, so that they're nice and clean for storage. Now, this isn't all of the onions that we grew this year. I have been canning onions up for the last month, things like French onion soup and salsa and chutney and a lot of things that I've shown you, and we've also been cooking with them. But this is just what's left to put down in storage to use for cooking throughout the rest of the year. Now, I've also, earlier in the spring, was able to do a harvest of onion greens, and I got those in the freeze dryer. So we have a lot of onion powder that we can also use for cooking. And then we will harvest another round of that from the bunching onions, the perennial onions that I have growing in the garden. But these are just the bulb onions that we will eat throughout the rest of the year. So I have these nice little stretchy plastic bags. They're kind of like the ones that you get in the grocery store, and I got them off Amazon. I'll link them in the video description. And I'm filling the bags with approximately 10 to 12 onions each. And I'm doing a variety of sizes in each bag. I want some that are large and some medium, some small, so that I have options when I go to prepare meals. And so what I'll do is whenever a bag empties, I can head down to the cellar and grab a new bag and bring it up, and those will last me, a week or two, and then I can go down and grab another bag. So this is exciting to get these put away. Of course, I'm going to need some onions still for the rest of canning season left out and for cooking here in the next week or so. So I saved some to put into the kitchen, and then we needed to move on to the garlic. Same thing with the garlic. I've been using it since we cured it and got it in this box for storage, but it's time to get it now in more ideal storage conditions. It's very hot and humid up in my kitchen, and the cellar is more ideal for storing things like this. A cold room will eventually be the perfect storage area, but the cellar will have to do because it has better humidity and a cooler temperature. Just like with the onions, what I'll do is just when I empty a bag, I'll grab a new one from the cellar and bring it upstairs. And this is going to work out great for us. So I do not currently grow enough garlic for our seed. We will order that from a good friend here this fall to plant in October. This is just my garlic for eating this year. So this is what we ended up with. I know that next year I will grow twice as many of these Patterson bulb onions to get us through the whole year. This, isn't an ideal amount for my family, but I was definitely experimenting with those Patterson onions this year and decided that they were a great storage option for us. So we will be doing 2 full beds of those next year. So thankfully, Adam got those hooks down there for me. I'm just hanging those bags up from the rafters so they're not, sitting down anywhere on a shelf or on the ground or anything. And that is just going to have to do for now. Like I said, in the future we'll have a cold room, but this we're just making do with what we have in this current season. So you guys know that I've been very busy processing things like peaches and apples and all of this bulk fruit that I had got from friends and purchased from local farmers. And I had forgotten about a bag of cherries that I had bought before the peaches came, and I had wanted to make a cherry pie and just forgot about it and never processed these. And then I was watching a video with Meg from the Holler Homestead, and she had done the same thing and forgotten cherries, and she had reminded me that I had these cherries in the fridge, and I was like, oh, I really need to make something out of these before they go bad. So I decided to do a small project. It had cooled down in the kitchen enough to do some canning. So I'm just removing the pits from these cherries. I do have a cherry pitter, but it is out in my garage in storage since it's a tool that I only typically use once a year. And it was such a small amount of cherries that it didn't warrant going out, finding it, washing that tool when I could just very easily pit them with a straw. So what I use is a metal straw like this. Sometimes the pits get stuck in the straw and I have to use that metal chopstick then to kind of push them out. But this works great. It took me less than 10 minutes to get all of these cherries pitted. It's just kind of a messy process. So my plan is to make cherry jam and also make cherry jelly from the pits and all of the bits of fruit that are attached to the pits. So I'm definitely not going to waste this little bowl of pits here. I'm going to remove any stems that are in there, and we're going to set that aside and use that in a little bit after we make some cherry jam. So I have 4 cups of cherries here in my pot. To those cherries, I'm going to add 1/4 cup of lemon juice, and then I'm just going to kind of smash these down and blend them a little bit with the immersion blender. I don't want it blended into a puree. I still want some chunks of cherry, and this is giving me an opportunity to check to see if I missed any pits. There's nothing worse than biting down on a pit when you're eating cherry jam or some pie, so I'm being very thorough and checking for pits in that mix there. I found some Sure gel while I was cleaning out my pantry and reorganizing it last weekend, and I don't typically use this, but since I have it, I'm going to use it before it goes bad. Sure gel is a pectin that helps your jelly or jam set. So I just emptied 1 packet of that Sure gel into the lemon juice and cherry mixture. We're going to stir that around really well and get it incorporated into the mix. And then we need to get this pot on the stove and let it come to a full boil. That pectin is what is going to gel this and solidify it. But the reason I don't typically use Sure gel is that it is a high sugar pectin. You have to use a lot of sugar with this in order to get it to set properly. You can't cut the sugar in these recipes. So I did have to use 5 cups of sugar. And to that sugar, I'm going to add a little bit of almond extract. When I'm baking with cherries, I like to add almond extract because I do find that it has a bit of a cherry flavor to it. and it just works really well. Those flavors go well together. Once our cherry mixture came to a boil, I took it off the stove and I'm adding that sugar and almond extract mixture to it. We're gonna stir all of that in together, and then once it's all incorporated together, we're gonna have to get this back on the stove and bring it to a boil for another minute. You don't wanna skip this step or you risk your jam or jelly not setting properly. This smells amazing. I love the taste of cherries. We actually planted a cherry tree this year and look forward to harvesting our own cherries in the future. But it's going to be a while before that happens. For now, we just enjoy cherries in small amounts whenever I can find them on sale locally. So after it boiled for a minute with the sugar mixture in there, it was time to get it into jars. I typically do my jams and jellies in half-pint jars, and my children will go through one full half pint in a meal, so that works out pretty well. And that's why people often wonder, why do you can so much jam and jelly? Well, we can't have butter with our bread and things because of allergies, so we stick to using jam and jelly on our bread instead. So I need a lot. If we're going through one jar like this per meal, we need a lot stored up to make it through a whole year. So these 7 little jars won't get us very far, but hey, it's more jars than we had at the start of the day, and it prevented those cherries that were sitting in the fridge from going to waste. So I'm thankful for Meg from the Holler Homestead for reminding me that I needed to do something with these. If you don't watch the Holler Homestead, you really should. I love their content. They're a great family with great homesteading content. So now let's get to those pits that we had set aside. We don't want to forget about those. I'm just dumping them into a pot here, and I added 4 cups of water to it. And we're gonna boil that down on the stove just for a couple minutes in order to get all of that cherry fruit off of the pits and turned into a lovely cherry juice. So once that was accomplished, we're gonna strain out the pits from that juice. And as you can see, initially, that cherry juice is really a dark purplish color. Well, we're going to also add 1/4 cup of lemon juice to this juice, just like with the jam, and I love it. It's like a magic trick. When you add that lemon juice, it turns it into this lovely light pink kind of color. It's just beautiful, and that really reminds you of cherries. So I love when it makes that change when you add the lemon juice. So we had our 4 cups of cherry juice. We added 1/4 cup of lemon juice. We're going to put this back into the pot and get that on the stove and get it started boiling. But first we need to add our pectin. Just like with the jam, I'm using Sure Gel, but since this is hot, I'm going to make sure that I'm stirring it and whisking it in so that none of that pectin clumps up. It's much better when you add pectin to cooler ingredients, but if you add it to warm like this, you just want to stir it in and make sure you don't get any clumps. Same thing with the jam. We have 5 cups of sugar here. We're going to add some almond extract to it. And I decided to pour this hot mixture back into the pot that the jam came out of, just so we don't waste any of the excess juice and stuff that was down there in the bottom. We're going to incorporate that sugar into it, and then just like with the jam, we're going to get it back on the stove and bring it to a boil for 1 full minute while the sugar is in there. So a lot of people, particularly people that aren't from America, have a lot of questions about what is the difference between jam and jelly, because I believe in some other places they have different definitions for these 2 items. So jelly is what you see here. It is a spreadable item that is made from the juice of a fruit, whereas jam is what I showed you earlier. It is a spreadable item that is made with fruit bits in it. So they're very similar, in flavor. It's just that with a jam, you're getting fruit when you spread it out on your bread or wherever you're putting it. And with jelly, you're just having a smoother juice-like consistency. And so we use both of these very similarly. Typically, if we're going to make something like a nut butter sandwich, we do sun butter and jelly. If we're going to spread it on homemade bread as a side with dinner or something, we'll typically use jam. But we definitely use them interchangeably. When I make something like a jelly roll, I'll use either of the items, just whatever I have on hand. But we were able to make the jelly just because we had the pits, and I'm thankful I got 6 more total servings for my family out of this, what would otherwise be waste if we didn't use those pits. So make sure when you're canning up your fruit that you don't neglect the pits and other items that still have some fruit flesh attached to them. We had a little bit left over in the bottom of the pot, and I decided to just go ahead and put that in the fridge, and we could use that this weekend since I didn't have a jar of jelly opened up currently. So the kids will definitely enjoy that cherry jelly. We haven't had cherry jelly in a really long time. So I ended up processing both the jam and jelly together in the water bath because it filled one full pot, and it processed for 10 minutes. And look at that beautiful colors. I just love that. That's a great addition to the pantry. As always this week, the freeze dryer was also running. I did a lot of leftover and random bits. This was some avocado that was at risk of getting overripe. And so we will use that this winter for guacamole. We can just powder it up and get it wet and make guacamole from that. I did the same thing with some bananas that were also becoming overripe. And so these can make banana bread this winter. Same thing, we can just rehydrate it and then add it into our bread mixture. This was the very last of the peaches. I'm so glad to be done with preserving peaches for the year. So one last tray of peach slices for snacking. And then, of course, it's gardening season. There's always extra zucchini to process. So I just decided to shred some up, and that will also be for zucchini bread and things like that this winter. I get a lot of questions about how do I choose, what things do I choose to freeze dry versus can versus just put in the freezer? And really it just all depends. Whenever the freeze dryer trays are empty, I just find something to fill them with because I know we'll use it. And so it's just kind of whatever's available. I'll look in the fridge, and we might just have a little bit here and there that needs to be preserved. And the freeze dryer is great for that because nothing truly goes to waste. If you have a tray's worth of space, there's always some kind of leftover or something that can go on it. So that's another thing that I did this week. I had lots of leftovers in the fridge, and so I decided to do some freeze-dried meals. I also just had enough okra to fill one tray. We'll use that for soup. This was some split pea soup the kids had for lunch, and I always make too much, so we'll go ahead and freeze dry that. And then I also had a little bit too much spaghetti, so we'll freeze dry 2 trays of that. And these will be full freeze dried meals. They're kind of like MREs when they're done freeze drying. So sometimes in the winter, the children for a lunch, everybody will go down and grab one little bag of a freeze dried meal. It's portioned out into quart amounts, and they really enjoy just picking from the selection like that. So I did a good job this week, I think, of getting through what was on the table. Got all of the peaches cleared out just in time now for pears to come. So we picked up our 4 bushels of pears that we ordered from the local Amish. Our pears currently, our pear trees are too young to be producing fruit. But thankfully, these pears are still a little bit green, so there's no rush for me to preserve these, and I'll slowly work through these next week and show you what I'm able to do with them. But we are still in the thick of preservation season here, so we'll have more videos to come on how we're going to finish out the month. And that's it for this week. We hope you enjoyed this look into what was happening in our kitchen. We will see you next week, friends, with another video. Until then, I hope you are blessed. Bye.